Oh, dude, this brings back some good memories.
Had good times in here, didn't we, mate?
Yeah, ran the super cheap car out of here for several years. Still looking immaculate, mate.
I reckon we had a few fights in here too.
Yeah, I reckon. Some of the joys of running a supercar team. Okay, Paul, so this is what we're talking about. Firstly, I think we have to explain what the previous generation car was, which they called Project Blueprint. They like coming up with these fancy names. And then the current car, which is Car of the Future. So just take us through some of the more major changes they did when they went from chassis A to chassis B.
Yeah, so Project Blueprint. Actually, this car was built for you and never raced.
This is brand shiny new.
Yeah, brand shiny new. It was built for you, and you never actually got to race it. So it's just been sitting here, but we've been assembling it. So what happened with Project Blueprint? You had a control chassis structure, but you had a fair bit of freedom in the roll cage area to make it fit the silhouette of your car. And as long as it met the cams and supercar safety standards in roll cage design, you could sort of do what you want up there with the bar work. So you can see that's a fair bit different.
So the teams could build their own chassis. So
yes.
A majority of the teams just about all had their own fab shop, built their own chassis like you did.
Built their own, but the chassis rails and the floor plan and all that was the first time we'd gone away from a production car. So everything hand built, no production parts in the build of the chassis.
The firewall was a production part, and the floor pan?
No.
No, that was open.
Yeah, that was open. So it started being that way, then it was like, let's just delete all that tin and we'll just make it how we want it.
Okay, so it was leading towards where we are now.
What we are now. So the cost savings in building this chassis to this chassis was, these are all the same no matter what model.
Yep.
This was, could change depending on what you manufacture. So if this was still in play when the Mustang come in, you probably could have got the Mustang on one of these Project Blueprint cars because there was some freedoms in the roll cage design.
Now, just to explain, because it's a comment that we've had from a lot of viewers, is that this Blueprint car was actually cheaper to build than the previous. It's actually more work and labour intensive building a roll cage into a standard road car shell.
Yeah, so we'd have a standard road car shell, and how we evolved to this was you'd spend hundreds of man hours just deleting all the OEM parts off the thing, get inside it, weld the roll cage in. This is the first time we went to a tube frame type chassis.
I remember in the Perkins days when you used to do it with the VS Commodores. You're right, they spend weeks just cutting everything out of it to put a roll cage in.
Cutting everything out of it, then they do a special production car run of shells down the line. Holden would stop the line and delete all that stuff. So it eventually evolved to Project Blueprint, which was a pretty cool car, which is what you see in Super 3 today.
Right. So better and cheaper.
Better and cheaper, stronger.
Okay, so what changed from then to Car of the Future as far as starting from the back end working forward?
Well, what changed was we got rid of the rear axle housing that we all banjo type housing. Went to a transaxle, so the gearbox and everything in the back part of this car now, which is sits there. The fuel tank then became put in here for safety.
So fuel tank here was right at the back, which
fuel
is
tank was there.
So if you've got a decent hit up the back, that's safety.
I have one of them. Few of us have
You're
one
on
of them.
fire. We've seen a few of them at Oran Park.
Fuel tank's there, so that's good. So they started controlling the chassis, the build of the chassis, all the tube work, and the actual chassis is controlled, not specific to each model. Moving forward, we go right to the front of the car, everything's controlled. We get to the front of the car here, and nothing's controlled forward from here.
So cut-off point was there?
Yes.
Why?
Well, the big thing why they didn't do it was redundancy. What they didn't want to have is have the teams have to make a new front end. So make everything you want, everything had to be new from the back part of the car, but they stopped it here. And it was...
Is that weird?
It was politics, mate. It was nothing to do with saving money. It was like teams trying to protect their IP in the front end of their car.
Which in the end now has punished them.
Well, the argument to keep all this was redundancy. But since then, everyone's had 20 different versions of a front end, and they're still making new ones now.
So in hindsight, they should have pressed on, not done 75% of the car, done 100%.
Whole thing should have been controlled, and the airbox should have been controlled, and the air take into anywhere the teams can spend money and develop, they'll spend money, and they spend a fortune in this area. So upright wishbones, cross members, top arms is free, and that's where they spend their money developing stuff.
It just seems lunacy to me that they didn't do that right from the word go. Like,
Well, they didn't want to throw all this stuff out, mate, but they all made 3 or 4 new versions every week anyway.
yeah, absolutely. Machine shop guys kept them in business, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Chassis wise, now looking at this chassis,
Yeah, sorry.
right? Look at this chassis right here. My question to you is, did they go forward from going blueprint to car of the future because it was meant to be cheaper, meant to save the teams in the category money? But in hindsight now, especially with the debacle of trying to fit the Mustang body parts onto this, which has been an absolute nightmare and made the car look a bit funky, to say the least.
Yep.
Would they have been better off staying with the Project Blueprint car? At least they could have altered the chassis to suit pretty well any bodywork that were going to go on it, within reason.
In history, probably yes, but the reason we went this way was to try and entice new manufacturers. We thought if we have a transaxle, they'll come in. If we have independent rear end, it'll have more OEM relevance. But the big reason why we went to a control chassis was hopefully one person would build them all. So you get economies of scale, but it never happened that way. All the teams just ended up building their own anyway, so the price never went down.
But why didn't they do that? Because, you know, if you
We were meant to go to
to a
single-
bulk distributor, it's going to be cheaper.
That's what never happened. So you never had bulk purchasing, and you never had bulk distribution of parts. The idea was always to have a parts truck where if you had a transaxle problem or an upright problem, you could go to a centralised parts truck. It never happened. The teams got control of it, started building their own chassis again, and all you did was change the design and didn't save any money.
The idea was right, bad execution.
Left
Fair to say.
Teams got involved, messed it up.
Again, what we said before,
Yeah.
earlier on in the show, keep the teams out of it.
Because they'll just protect the bits that go fast, make them go fast, or the bits that they think make them go fast.
I want to look at some other components to see where, if we were running the show, right, where we could shave money off straight away.
It's easy.
Let's go over and have a look.
Okay.
Paul, just spotted this. This is a Mark car chassis.
Yeah, the Mark car, the Mark II, which is the Mustang shaped car.
Yep.
So it's about a $45,000 item built by Pace Engineering.
All right.
Supercars need to go to something like this. The modern shapes of cars can be fitted to it, but this one's designed to fit the Mustang shape, so that's something they could go to.
Something they could look at.
Something they could look at.
Yep.
You're not going to save a lot of money unless you build a lot of them at once, just like we were talking to.
But that's it, should be one person making all the chassis. And there's more components, I think the doors, front and rear windscreen, there's more components on that standard off a Mustang than there is on the supercar.
Well, it is, but we base that off the Mustang. You know, the trouble the Mustang had in supercar racing, it had to fit the car of the future platform. So that platform was designed to look cool from the start.
Good thing to look at anyway.
Yeah.
Rightio, let's get on to components. Starting from the anti-roll bar system, seems pretty minor because you think, oh, it's just a tube of metal with some knurling on the end, and the rocker system. But the front and anti-roll bar, that was one of the components that was left open in the car of the future, which I believe should have been fixed and controlled. Seems simple, seems cheap, but it's not, is it?
No, there's a lot of development going on this area. So especially with twin spring being now outlawed, the development in the rocker, so it can be digressive or progressive in the way it actions. So the teams are really developing in this area a lot at the moment.
So this is a rocker that alters the rod that goes down to the blades on the sway bar.
And you see the different holes there where you can pick it up, which gives it a different motion ratio. So that's where they're into now. So just control that. Control the way you use it. Teams have got hydraulics, they've got cables, they've got winders. So if you give teams and engineers something to play with, they'll play with it.
So again, it's not so much the component price, it's the price of the development. These components may be, pick a figure, 5-10 grand, but you're paying $100,000 a year to a boffin to try and find better ways to do it.
They'll find better ways to do it, and then the more engineers you got, the more computing power you got, and we're looking for little tenths of a second, and they'll exploit this area if you don't lock it down.
So again, something that should have been controlled right from the word go.
Should have been done.
Next thing, now Supercars have announced they're looking into controlling and putting a spec shocker in. Again, this is something I think right from the outset should have been put into the car of the future. But a lot of teams argued that, oh, we've already got the dampers.
Yes.
let's roll them over and run with the same thing. But how's the cost in these things?
Well, the cost and the thing I'm a bit worried about with a control spec damper is maintenance. So you know that our cars are pretty aggressive on curbs and the tracks we race on. So the one I'm not completely sold on is a control damper because it's something that needs to be serviced regularly. And if you've got to open up to service, how do you control what's inside? So for me, that could be one that could be left to the teams, but control the components. But I could be wrong.
I look at it as a controlled ECU. If you've got a controlled damper and you think someone's opened it up, it has to be a sealed unit, or someone's opened it up and had a bit of a fudge with it. The body being Supercars should have a set to go, okay, we're just going to randomly change them, right? Randomly give you a set of dampers to put in your car because they should be all the same.
That's a good point. You've just answered my question. So you've got a claimer rule.
Yeah, and these are locally produced. These are Australian.
So I can walk up to you and go, the damper costs $2,000. You're Roland Dane. I'm going to give you $2,000 and take the front dampers out of your car.
Exactly
or
right.
go to the truck and get a new set. That works for me. You've fixed that problem, Russ. Thanks.
Done. Okay, no problems. And this is a Super Shock, Australian made. If they put it out to tender, that's a sack shocker. Yeah. I mean, this would be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, wouldn't it? With maintenance, buying the shockers. Everyone goes. The trick of the week is I want a Olin's, I want a Sachs, I want a Super Shock. And all of a sudden, the trick of the week, everyone has to go out and buy new dampers.
Yeah, and what happened was the internal components got controlled.
Yep.
So you couldn't update your shocks. But then the old trick came in, the company doesn't make that part anymore.
They have to buy upgrade.
Buy the upgrade.
So they're upselling all the time.
Yeah, they're still upselling all the time. And then all this flows back down into the Dunlop series as well. So those guys end up getting raped too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And again, it's personnel to service these things and keep them maintained and all the rest of it go, instead of making one robust unit that will actually do a few meetings.
Yeah, so the smart thing to do with this would be to start introducing some of this stuff in Super 2 and save those guys some money as well.
Absolutely. So, well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So
the teams wouldn't like that, but because they couldn't sell all their old shit to them.
So already, dude, we've probably shaved $100,000 off the budget just in those couple of items.
Yeah, you got capital expenditure costs, you got the maintenance, and you got the development. So you put that together, it starts adding up.
It's not hard, is it?
No.
This is a big ticket item. I've been looking forward to getting my teeth into this one. And I'm going to look for some guidance here, only because I know how much these components, because I was involved with a team that was going to upgrade these components, and when we got the invoice, I nearly fell off the chair. Now this is the upright we were talking about first up on the chassis.
Yeah, this is the
bit they stopped. They should have controlled.
Your front axle.
Yep.
That never got controlled when the car of the future came in.
So upright, steering upright, which holds the front wheel on.
It's got your spindle in it.
Got the spindle on it.
Yep.
Your nut and everything, and the two wishbones that go back and hold it on. Now this is a 888 system. The 888 engineering mate.
Very early on, like a Mark II, which we still run on that car, Brock Feeney's at the moment.
Okay.
Yep.
If you wanted to upgrade this to now it's number 7, is that right?
Yeah, I think they're at
number
7
7
and they come
upright.
back to 5, but there's stuff coming out all the time.
Give me a tag.
I reckon it's around the 50 grand mark for the front axle.
So 50 grand for a pair of these and 4 wishbones. So 4 of these and 2 of these, $50,000, which you can buy a damn good road car for that.
And the problem is, mate, when you belt the wall, it's an expensive repair.
Which happens pretty often.
Yeah, which happens pretty often.
Damage the upright, damage the spindle, damage the wishbones.
Yeah, and
bang, bang,
again,
bang.
The guy sitting on the hill, the guy watching on TV, doesn't care.
Who cares?
Yeah. Well, the team owners should care because they're all going broke trying to keep up with each other.
And these items here, because they're so integral in the setup of the cars and how they pull camber on and all the different dynamics that go with it, they've just been punching these things out over the years, haven't they, since Car of the Future?
They have been, and now with the advent of simulation and stuff like that, any part of the car that's not locked down, the teams are going to exploit, and the ones with the money are going to exploit it. So the regulations need to be, to me, they need to be tight enough so people say to me, why don't you get back into supercars? This is a reason why I don't want to get back into supercars. Why the hell would I?
It's amazing. I mean,
I don't want to get in a race to who have the best upright. I want to go race the guy.
Have a look at it. I can't believe the cost of that. And don't think there's
It's a nice piece. It would cost that to make.
I know.
No one's getting ripped off because the regulation allows you to build such a nice piece. Look, it's fabricated, it's strong.
It's beautiful.
All the development that's gone into it. Yeah. The cost is justified, but do we need it to be that? We don't.
Of course it does. And we don't want to. We don't want to be one of these shows that just smashes people up for the sake of it. I mean, this was a clear mistake. It should have been controlled without coming up with a solution.
Yep.
Solution is, ta-da, right. This is again off the Mark car, which has done 24-hour races.
Yeah.
I mean, it's done more racing than a supercar would ever see in a season.
Yeah.
This, I didn't actually even realise it. This does the back and front of the car.
Yeah, so you can see it's got ears on both sides. So you only need one. It'll go left, front and rear, left or right. Where this piece you need one for each corner. Yep. So you need half the spares in the truck for a start.
I mean, what a good idea.
We don't get any knockoff. The bearings out of an Audi road car. It's simple. It works. And it does the job, and if everyone's got the same thing, what's it matter?
And for the punter in the stand, who cares whether this is on the car or that on the car? Now, give me the price difference of this components, which do exactly the same as that. Give me the price.
Well, the front axle set for this, you're about $8,000 versus 50.
8,000 to 50.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you, mate.
So you just saved a team $42,000. That's just on one set.
Yeah, and the spare in the truck. You don't need the spare in the truck. You only need one in the truck, or that's your common part supply truck. So
it's just a no-brainer. Like, and to be quite honest, it looks like a better bit of kit.
Well, it's simple. It's just built. That's fabricated. That's billet. The one in the back of the car is billet, very similar to in the car of the future. That's controlled. Lock the front end down.
And same with the steering rack too. This is a steering rack off a Mark car, which is actually electric.
Yeah, so I reckon this is the way supercars have got to go anyway. So this is electric, variable ratio power steering. It's actually out of a BMW X5.
Yep.
Again, bolts in, works. You don't need power steering pumps. Has way more relevance to what the road car's doing. It's a $4,000 item versus a $8,000 item, and away you go.
And the loads and stresses that would go through this on the Mark car would be every bit as much as what a supercar would see.
Yeah, but you're not allowed electric power steering in supercars. It's still got to be what it is. So all this stuff, when they do the next car,
this is what they got to think about doing. Well, not think about, they have to do this.
Yeah, they do.
Because again, in these items here, when you take a year's running, a year development, we've probably shaved $200,000 off with these items.
And you've got OEM relevance.
With one car. Oh, yeah. And if they want relevance to the factory, absolutely.
They're all talking about OEM relevance, mate.
Well, there you go. This what leads me into my next one. Here's an article. I actually pulled this off of Autosport magazine as well. These are the NASCAR plans for 2021.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, right?
Yep.
Had a flick through this, and all the words that you've just used is what the chief of NASCAR has used right here. They want market relevance. They want more of that. They realise NASCAR has to look more like the road-going version.
Yep.
Mechanically, they realise they've got to come more in line. They're talking hybrid already. Eventually, having hybrid systems. Whoever thought of that? Like a redneck sport of NASCAR, thinking about hybrid. So they're thinking ahead of the game as well.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because they did make a visit. NASCAR did make a visit to Adelaide this year.
To have a look at what's going on over this side.
Yeah, have a look what we have got going on.
So to me, when I read this article, it's a really interesting read that to me, it sounds like they're falling more into line on what supercars are doing here up to a point, but also going beyond that as well in looking to the future. My question to you is, Paul, why wouldn't you jump on a plane if you were head of development for supercars? Why wouldn't you jump on a plane to the States, go see Mr. Boss Man of NASCAR and go, dude, sounds like you're going on the same trail as we are. What say we have a bit of a joint venture here? Can we do something together to keep the cost down for both of us?
I reckon that's already going on.
Serious?
I reckon.
What do you know? You're not telling me?
Well, I know that Mark Royce, who used to be the head of Holden here, is now the head of GM.
Yep.
And he would have told those guys, have a look what they're doing in Australia. The road car relates more to the race car.
He switched on, Mark Royce too. Good
He's
dude.
switched on. Penske would have said the same thing. And
Okay.
Sean Seamer just got back from America, so.
I think you know. I think you know a little bit more than what you're letting on.
Well, you know, I've got some good mates over there in NASCAR,
Yeah.
I asked a few questions, and I reckon there could be more of an alliance than what you think, and
Is that right?
it all adds up.
Makes sense.
It makes sense, mate. We're going to be racing the same cars. I don't know if you end up with something exactly the same, because
Engine-wise.
you could. And the only thing that could be a bit different is the NASCAR's got to be bloody strong to take those big hits on those ovals.
Which they are. They're built like a tractor, aren't they?
But engines, powertrain, the hybrid, the transmission, there's got to be a lot of common stuff there where we could all get together on the same page.
Let me tell you about something as well. I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but the German Touring Car Championship, DTM, right, and the Super GT Championship in Japan, they've
gone parallel.
Just shaken hands on a deal to share the chassis, technology, engines, and everything. They've done a joint deal because they realised they've been going costs, especially in German touring cars, are blown out to the max. So they've done a deal to run under the same specifications and regulations their two championships.
Yep.
So there's old mate from Super GT and you know,
similar cars, racing on
shaking
similar
hands.
tracks.
It's done deal.
I don't think that'd be as easy with the NASCAR route, but there's definitely some common ground there for sure.
Yeah, at least the conversations have been had.
Yeah, look, if we source OEM manufacturer supplied race engines, which we should be using, not these hybrid things that we've got to make custom parts for that cost 150 grand.
Especially if you're looking at the road of introducing Camaro, or it might even be Corvette, because there's no guarantee Camaro is going to last forever. Corvette will, because it's an iconic car, but at least if you're aligning yourself with someone that's running the same shape cars, why wouldn't you?
Oh, you've got to deal with the manufacturers, and the manufacturers are in Detroit, so makes sense, Russ.
Right, this is interesting. Well, let's get back for part two. We're going to look at engines in part two as well, because I don't have to tell you.
Jeez, I've spent some money on them over the years.
I know you have. I've lunched a few of yours in the years too. And so that's going to be an interesting one, because there's big bucks to be saved under the bonnet. So that's going to be interesting.
Cool.
Good chat.
Good on you, mate. Investigative journalist. Coming here, mate.
Well, dude, the Norwell Motorplex engine shop.
Yeah, there's been a few motors building here in the days. This is actually the BMW Motorsport engine shop back in the mid-90s. So
everything from 4-cylinder to 8-cylinder has been through this joint as well. Now, I'm really excited about doing this part of it, because these little units here, when I say little, the power plants for supercars, man, hasn't there been some money blown developing and keeping these things alive over the years?
There has been. It's always been an arms race within the engine. It's not called motorsport for nothing. There's a reason why it's called motorsport. And you know, when the teams are all drunk on manufacturer money, it was okay. You could pour money into this stuff, but now it's out of control. There's way better alternatives out there.
Now, to have a bit of a rundown on these units, now, I liken it a bit like in part one, we talked about the chassis and only 75% of it was controlled instead of 100%. It's a bit like the engines as well, because even though some components are controlled, there is parts of it that are open. Things like the inlet manifold here as well, that's pretty well open slather.
Yeah, it's open slather. So the block and the cylinder head is a control part, but you can port that however you want. All teams have different port. It matches up with what the inlet manifold is, and you just keep going and going and going. Like, you know, even the rocker covers are just engineering masturbation. So there's just stuff going on everywhere.
Absolutely. And how many inlet manifolds? I mean, you know yourself, since you've been in the game and teams that I've been involved with as well, how many different types of inlet manifolds have come in and out the...
Yeah, you just keep evolving, and you want the power
machine shop.
Different stuff. But, you know, everyone's pretty locked down and maximised everything they can get out of this now. So,
I mean, they make good horsepower for a 5 litre. They make good horsepower, very linear power as well.
Yeah, and they just evolved. But that's... If you want a new one of them, you're 120 grand.
I thought it was up near 150 at one stage, wasn't it? Depending on who you're dealing with.
Who you're dealing with, but yeah, somewhere between that. But conservatively, about 120 grand worth of customised parts.
And each team has a minimum of 2, possibly 3 per car.
Yeah, you need 2 per car, but most teams would have 3. You've got to have a spare, or access to a spare in a pool.
So that'd be anywhere between 350 to 450 $1,000 just in capital of engines.
Yep.
Before you even go racing.
Before you even go racing, you've got that capital cost.
Okay. Now, the thing that blows me away about these race engines, as technical as they are, is the rebuilds. I mean, they say 4,000 kilometres, but most teams are around 2,500 kilometres before they rebuild the engines if they want to stay at the top. I'm sure the top teams are doing that. Cost for rebuilding one of these?
A 4,000k service, you're around 40 grand. So,
wow.
If you've got your own engine shop, obviously it's a bit cheaper, but you still have the cost of running the engine shop. But if you're a team like Charlie Schwelkelt and he drops his engine up there, or a development series team which has the same engine, if you're running a Commodore in the development series and drop your engine up to KRE, you're 40 grand.
But for the average person that's looking at this, getting their head around that they take this engine in at, like I said, between 2,500 to 4,000 and spend $40,000 on a rebuild, that would just blow people's minds. They couldn't get their head around. It's so expensive.
As again, you said, mate, it's the price of a good family road car.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. You can see why teams are hemorrhaging here when they've got this sort of expense in just the engine part alone, just in the engine unit.
Yeah, and for sort of, the controls on the engine are pretty open, and for what it is, it's not that expensive. But technology's moved on, and the crate engine stuff you can buy off the shelf now is there and makes the same power.
And what's the power on the average one of these engines?
Mid 600s, mid 600s, depending on what dyno you're on. But they're all about there now. And
this is supposed to be there's a cap on the horsepower.
Oh, it's a power figure that all the teams have got to meet. So.
It looks different. Average. It looks different on track. I know handling's got a lot to do with it, and the car and all the rest of it. But where you make that power is changeable, though, isn't it? Like you can change the power torque of the engine.
Well, we do. And with our Super 2 car, we change the inlet manifold runner length, and varying on what track you're doing, and move the torque curve around.
So to move, even though you're supposedly capped in power output, you can change the power torque of that, which means an added cost. Because if you've got different inlet manifolds or you've got different ways to configure the engine, there's still a cost because you've got to change all that.
Yeah, you're always mapping the engine, and there's closed loop mapping now where the engine will map itself. Like technology's moved on. These aren't fly-by-wire. We should have fly-by-wire technology if we want OEM relevance. So there's lots of reasons to move away from this old engine, pushrod engine. The number one is the cost, but then technology's there as well, which the team should be embracing.
Right, so is there an alternative?
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Right, okay. Just so happens, in this cupboard, now this is a Ford Coyote engine.
Yeah, so that's built and developed here, coincidentally for our Mark car program. Okay. So 620 horsepower, $40,000 capital cost to build it. So we take the stock engine and change the rods, the pistons, some camshafts, for performance manifold, but still factory bought. And 620 horsepower. It's also got a custom sump on it. Does 10,000 Ks before it needs a service. So, it's basically the same power output.
So why would you, if you're within 20 or 30 horsepower of the engine they're using now, service life is just about tripled.
Yep.
Get 10,000 Ks out of a service, and the capital cost is a third. Why aren't you looking at this? Like, why wouldn't you go? It's just an absolute no-brainer.
It is a no-brainer. Again, it's someone making the hard decision and saying that's what we're going to do, because about 6 months you got your money back. So
just in rebuild costs.
Yeah, you're doing 14,000 kilometres a year, most car, by the time it does testing, racing, ride days, does all that. So at about $10 a kilometre to run that engine, and this engine's $2 a kilometre.
Well, at one rebuild cost of the current engine would pay for that engine.
Pay for that engine. So you
just a rebuild.
You just throw it in the bin if you want it, and you're way in front.
It's just, I can't get my head around it. And considering Chevrolet do a crate engine as well, if they wanted to have two, really ideally you'd just have one engine. Yeah,
well, if GM Performance have got heaps of crate engines for every different sort of manufacturing racing you want to do, whether it's dirt or late models, or even the stadium trucks have got a GM crate engine that makes 640 horsepower or something. So, yeah, it's got to be looked at. It's something the teams need to move away from. But the biggest advantage of this thing is the fly-by-wire throttle.
Yep. Instead of cable.
Which the car of the future has got the ability to do that, but that means changing all that manifold. But then you can do all safe. You can do your pit lane speed limit. You can do parity off the e-throttle. So if you want to paritise the engines, if you have a GM engine and you have a Ford engine and the output's different, you can just paritise it off the
throttle percentage.
Yeah,
so
give
it 95% instead of 100.
95%.
Yeah, right.
You know, if you get to a track and you think the cars are going too fast, you can just make all the cars run at less throttle opening.
You could actually make it remote. So if there's a yellow car, yellow flag situation or pace car.
Safety's a big thing now, and if you're on race control and there's a drama on the track and you can push a button and slow all the cars down to a speed, that can be done.
Remotely, easily.
Done remotely, yeah.
And it's done in other categories too.
Yeah, it is.
So it's not like it's anything new as well.
No, they're not pioneers.
I mean, again, a no-brainer. To me, it's a bit like we spoke about the chassis in part one of this cost cutting, was that, you know, it's a bit like the uprights. For the guy and the punter and their family sitting up watching the racing, who cares what's under the bonnet? They just want to see good racing.
They just want to see good racing, and you know that's where we come from. If you go back to Group C, Group A days, it was a manufacturer-based motor, and we've gone away from to a custom engine, and we need to get back to this.
Let me throw a curveball at you. Okay, say, right, for instance, right, they don't want to go away from it. They want to keep it manufacturer-based. They still want to run the Nissan, the Chev, the Ford, right? I remember back in the SBR days, right, when I was there, they had a ride car. It was a three-seater, right, ride car. And
Stroker, was it?
Yeah, they got a 5 litre. They bought it out, so it was piston, rods, and crank. Made it 7 litre, revved it to 5.5 or 5,500 RPM. It was just a ride car, right? That thing pounded around for years. Like
heaps of torque.
Heaps of torque. Didn't rev. It would lap exactly the same lap time as a supercar with 3 punters in the thing. Like, I had plenty of torque, no problem, sounded good, did everything right, but that nearly did about 10,000 Ks before they even touched the thing.
Because it wasn't stressed.
It wasn't stressed, didn't have the revs, still sounded good. So for a set of rods, crank and pistons in a current engine, it'd be an easy changeover.
That could be a
10
thing.
grand it's
but
fixed.
You're going to move away from the 5 litre formula, which doesn't matter anymore.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter anymore.
Doesn't matter. So if they wanted to stick with that, there's still alternatives.
Yeah, but your crank rods and pistons are going to be more expensive than that.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally that's it, but I'm just thinking as an alternative. But this is something they should have looked at years ago. I mean, like I said, Stone Brothers, who made that, actually mentioned to Supercars, hey, we've got this ride car and we don't touch this engine. It just pounds around. We do a bit to the rockers now and then, and that's it. But it just seemed over the top of the heads, and and bang.
Too busy racing each other, mate.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, we shaved. So what do we shaved off there? Per car per year, 150. Oh no, more than that.
Yeah, well, capital costs alone, you're 80 grand versus 280.
Yep.
For 2 engines. And at 14,000 Ks a year, there's 140 grand a year to maintain that, and 28 grand a year to maintain that.
So we're gonna save, even with capital costs included, like you're probably up near 350,000.
Yeah.
Bang, ka-ching.
Bang. We might get a race team back.
I think we might. If they go to this, we'll start racing again.
We would.
We'll make a comeback.
But you would, mate. You would. Yeah. If this all got involved, I'd be straight back in the game.
There you go. A few others too.
I want to race. I want to race on the track. I don't want to get in an arms race with engines.
Yeah. Well, look. There's one other thing. Is tyres. Let's go have a look, because tyres is another massive cost. So let's go and have a look. Now, dude, this is another massive expense as well. Is tyres. I can't believe all these black round things that's in here. This is just for your Super 3 car.
Yeah, so this is our tyre bank. There's some stuff there from the Super 2, but it's a tyre bank you've got to manage, and it's a human resource that costs a lot of money to do. So, you know, scrap it, cars turn up to the track with new tyres on, the fans get to see who's actually fastest.
So, this is, like you said, this is just Super 2, Super 3.
Yep.
So for a main game team,
Yep.
they've got huge warehouses or cool rooms.
They've
you were
all
telling me?
got climate controlled rooms now where they store their tyres, and there's a full-time guy. Some teams have probably got two, just managing that tyre bank to work out what tyres they're going to use. They measure the tread depths, they measure the kilometres, they store them properly.
Because they got this ridiculous rule that you got to run around on old tyres.
You got to test on old tyres,
test.
and you got old tyres for practice. So to sort through that and what's good and what's bad is a big cost. But even though you do that and you try and get it right, sometimes you just get a goofy tyre, don't you? And you get a bad read on the car
and throws it out.
And you're just throwing everything out the thing. So just get rid of all that shit. Don't take them home. They're done. Scrap them, turn up to the track, put new tyres on, go out the gate, and the people sitting on the hill or watching on TV will know who the fastest is. Because P1 they go, oh, I didn't have tyres. Who's up the front?
Everyone's on the same tyre.
You haven't got to read.
So and that way you're just carting around the rims themselves. You're not carting around the tyres. So transport's going to be easier. So you just get the rims, fit them
bring them
up
home, clean them, crack test them, whatever you do, get ready, and then as soon as you get to the track on the weekend, put your tyres on and go.
And that poor guy that spends all these weeks rummaging around on these old tyres, picking the good ones, bad, stacking them, storaging them, turning them on the rims, all the rest of it, he can actually get on and do something useful.
Yep.
I'm sure he'd be pretty happy about it too.
Yeah, it's a wasted resource.
So
it's a false economy, mate.
And cost-wise, there probably wouldn't be much in it. It'd probably actually be cheaper.
It'd be cheaper, 100% cheaper, because the most expensive thing in a race team is your labour cost.
So maintaining this, opposed to just getting tyres when you rock up at a meeting, fit them up, and then pull them off at the end of the meeting, is going to be cheaper than trying to maintain used old tyres.
You got it.
It's a no-brainer.
We'll have a race team again, mate. Force from the dude racing.
I reckon we will. Anyone who wants to donate, make sure you do. We might start a GoFundMe.
You should own a wreck, mate.
Not at the moment. Not unless I'll own a wreck when they do what we're talking about. How's that?
Righto.
Okay, game on.